Today, we're diving headfirst into the murky, often baffling world of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Now, on paper, FEMA sounds pretty straightforward. Disaster strikes, FEMA swoops in, helps people get back on their feet. Except reality, as it often does, has other plans. We're not just talking about bureaucratic inefficiency, though Lord knows there's plenty of that to go around. We're talking about potential cover-ups, questionable spending, and operations so secretive, you'd think we were talking about the CIA, not an organization that hands out bottled water after hurricanes. Over the next few minutes, we're going to peel back the layers of bureaucracy and secrecy to expose 10 shocking secrets FEMA really doesn't want you to know. Buckle up, because things are about to get weird. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that shines a light on the, shall we say, interesting choices of those in power. We live in a digital age. We bank online, we date online, and some of you might be watching this on a device implanted in your brain. So, FEMA embracing technology makes sense. But disasters hit the most vulnerable the hardest. The elderly, the poor, and rural communities often lack reliable internet. That's the problem. FEMA's digital reliance risks leaving behind those who need help most. Picture this. You've lost your home in a natural disaster. You're reeling, trying to pick up the pieces, when FEMA arrives, a beacon of hope in the midst of chaos. They offer you temporary housing, a place to rest your weary head, a FEMA trailer. Sounds great, right? Except sometimes these supposed safe havens are anything but. We're talking about trailers riddled with formaldehyde, a known carcinogen, at levels that would make your average formaldehyde enthusiast blush. We're talking about respiratory problems, skin rashes, and a whole host of health issues plaguing the very people FEMA is supposed to be helping. It's a betrayal of trust, a slap in the face to those already grappling with unimaginable loss. And the worst part? FEMA has known about these issues for years, yet they continue to use these potentially toxic trailers. It's enough to make you wonder if FEMA stands for Federal Emergency Management, or maybe not. Okay, strap in, because this one gets a little weird. You know how some people stockpile toilet paper or hand sanitizer? Well, rumor has it that FEMA stockpiles something a little less conventional. We're talking about coffins. Yes, coffins. Rows upon rows of them, just sitting in warehouses, waiting for something. Now, FEMA claims these are for mass casualty events, a grim necessity in a world where disaster can strike at any moment. But the sheer number of these coffins, coupled with FEMA's penchant for secrecy, has fueled all sorts of conspiracy theories. Are they preparing for a pandemic? A zombie apocalypse? A mass culling of the population orchestrated by lizard people disguised as government officials? Okay, that last one might be a bit far-fetched even for me. But the point is, FEMA's silence on the matter speaks volumes. They're more concerned with managing their image than providing transparency, and that's a dangerous game to play. You'd think FEMA would ensure aid goes to those in need, but often, FEMA hands out money to unaffected people and funds non-essential projects. It's a misuse of funds that could help rebuild lives. But hey, someone's nephew is now a well-funded underwater basket weaver. We've talked about toxic trailers and questionable spending, but FEMA's secrecy hides a danger far more insidious: the potential for environmental damage. In their rush to respond to disasters, FEMA has been known to cut corners, to prioritize speed over sustainability. We're talking about debris removal projects that have contaminated water supplies, construction efforts that have destroyed fragile ecosystems, and a general disregard for the long-term environmental consequences of their actions. It's a classic case of short-term solutions creating long-term problems. And while FEMA might pat themselves on the back for a job quickly done, it's the communities they're supposed to be helping that will be left to deal with the environmental fallout. It's a reminder that even with the best of intentions, even with the goal of helping others, there can be unintended consequences. Consequences that can have a devastating impact on the environment and the people who depend on it. Now, every government agency has its secrets, but FEMA seems to have a particular fondness for operating in the shadows. We're talking about secret programs, undisclosed operations, and a level of secrecy that would make even the most conspiracy-minded among us raise an eyebrow. What are they hiding? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some speculate that FEMA is involved in top-secret disaster simulations, preparing for scenarios so catastrophic they make Hollywood blockbusters look like a walk in the park. Others believe that FEMA is secretly building underground bunkers, safe havens for the elite, while the rest of us are left to fend for ourselves when disaster strikes. Now, I'm not one to indulge in conspiracy theories, but when an organization is as tight-lipped as FEMA, it's hard not to let your imagination run wild. The lack of transparency breeds distrust, and when it comes to an organization tasked with protecting the public, trust is paramount. FEMA's budget, a mysterious black hole where taxpayer dollars go to die. We're talking about billions of dollars allocated every year, and yet somehow there's never enough money to go around when disaster strikes. How is that possible? Well, let's just say that FEMA's definition of essential spending might be a bit different from yours or mine. We're talking about lavish conferences at luxury resorts, where FEMA officials sip cocktails and discuss the finer points of disaster management while actual disaster victims struggle to afford basic necessities. We're talking about contracts awarded to shady companies with ties to government officials, companies that charge exorbitant fees for services that are never fully rendered. It's a tale as old as time: government waste, inefficiency, and a blatant disregard for the very people they're supposed to be serving. And the worst part? It's a cycle that seems to repeat itself disaster after disaster. In the aftermath of a disaster, every second counts. But for FEMA, time seems to be a relative concept, something that can be stretched and manipulated at will. We're talking about instances where FEMA's response to disasters has been painfully slow, agonizingly delayed, leaving victims stranded and desperate for help that never seems to arrive. We're talking about bureaucratic hurdles, logistical nightmares, and a general lack of urgency that defies all logic. It's as if FEMA is operating on island time, completely oblivious to the suffering of those who are waiting, hoping, praying for their help to arrive. These delays have real-world consequences, costing lives, prolonging suffering, and turning what should be a coordinated response into a chaotic scramble for resources. It's a failure of epic proportions, a betrayal of the public trust that should not be tolerated. You'd think that an organization tasked with responding to emergencies would be a well-oiled machine, a model of efficiency and cooperation. But FEMA, like any good dysfunctional family, has its fair share of internal squabbles. We're talking about power struggles, turf wars, and a level of infighting that would make even the most seasoned political operatives blush. Different departments within FEMA seem more concerned with protecting their own budgets and advancing their own agendas than working together to achieve the common goal of helping disaster victims. It's a classic case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, and the result is a chaotic, often ineffective response to disasters. When those tasked with protecting us are too busy fighting amongst themselves, it's no wonder that the public is left feeling vulnerable and unprotected. It's a reminder that even in the face of crisis, human pettiness and bureaucratic infighting can undermine even the most noble of endeavors. In the age of information overload, trust is a precious commodity. But FEMA, it seems, has a rather casual relationship with the truth. We're talking about instances where FEMA has deliberately misled the public, downplayed the severity of disasters, and spread misinformation in an attempt to control the narrative. Whether it's underestimating the number of casualties, misrepresenting the availability of aid, or simply failing to correct false information, FEMA's penchant for spin-over substance has eroded public trust and put lives at risk. When those affected by disaster can't even trust the information coming from the very organization tasked with helping them, it creates a dangerous climate of fear and uncertainty. It's a reminder that in the aftermath of disaster, information is power, and those who control the flow of information wield immense influence. And when that influence is used to mislead and deceive, the consequences can be devastating. So there you have it, 10 shocking secrets FEMA would rather you didn't know. From digital exclusion to toxic trailers, secret coffins to budget mismanagement, FEMA's track record is, well, let's just say it leaves a lot to be desired. But the most important takeaway from all of this is the importance of staying informed, of asking questions, of holding those in power accountable. Don't just accept what you're told. Do your own research. And don't be afraid to speak out when something doesn't seem right. Because when it comes to disaster preparedness, knowledge is power, and your voice matters. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay informed, stay vigilant, and for God's sake, invest in a good quality air filter if you ever find yourself in need of a FEMA trailer.